So I thought I'd start with a quick story. I'm not sure if you've had a similar experience, but in the past I've tried to go shopping multiple times, and every time I go to one of the grocery stores, it either says car park full or car park blocked due to maintenance work, so I have to go and find a different car park. It's not an issue if you have a car, because you can just stop and figure out where to go. But as you could see in the title, we work in the aviation industry, so we have to keep things moving. So we can't just pull up and figure out where to go. So that's the challenge in aviation. And another challenge in aviation that we are facing is we tend to get disrupted, either by drones, sometimes it's a cyber attack, sometimes it's also just a technical glitch. So we lose one of the airports, so we lose one of the car parks, and we have to find out where to put all of the planes, and we don't have a lot of time for that. The third issue that we have observed in aviation is we've seen a massive increase in traffic numbers. So that's just to plot how busy the UK aviation industry got in recent years. To add to that, because of the increase in traffic, we've also seen an increase in the utilization of the runways in the UK. Now, buffer capacity is one of the crucial inputs in achieving resilience. So as you can tell, we haven't got a lot of slack resources in the system. So when we come in and we want to land, we have our designated airport. But if there's a drone in the sky, or if there's a cyber attack, we lose that airport facility. So what happens next? Well, we can go to a lot of different airports. So in the UK, for the simulation that we are running, we are considering the 34 busiest airports in the UK. So when you take off, you declare a first and a second diversion priority. So in the case that I just illustrated, we lose Gatwick Airport. So the first diversion priority would be Luton, which is here, and the second one would be Birmingham, actually where we are today. So we have stands available, but we have different sizes. So for example, if you take a big A380, that's the code F1. But if you take a A320, so that's the aircraft that we use on a lot of flights in Europe, that's a code C aircraft. So a code C aircraft can park in a bigger spot, but not vice versa. It's a bit like you can put a motorbike in a car park, and a car into a van, and a van into a lorry, but not the other way around. So that's another limiting factor that we have. We also have a runway utilization, as you could see in the graph that I showed earlier, where we've utilized a lot of the runways. So sometimes when you think of the example that I gave earlier, the multi-story car park, you can only put so many cars through the barriers, the entrance barriers. So sometimes there's space inside, so you could put more cars in, but the runway is one of the limiting factors. Now, the force is actually quite a limiting factor, and probably one of the factors not that many people are aware of. But we do have contractual agreements, because as soon as we land, we need someone to refuel the aircraft, we need someone to put stairs on the aircraft. So that means not all of the airlines can land at all of the airports. So in that instance, I picked Vueling, so that's a Spanish airline. And as you could see, there's also a Vueling flight in the scheduled arrivals that I picked as the example. And they cannot go to all of the airports that are listed. Again, I said that we have 34 airports in the UK that we use for the model. So our computational model works like this. So once we close Gatwick, for example, for a duration of 3 hours, in those 3 hours we have to divert 82 aircraft, for example. So that means not everyone can go to the designated first priority, which is a challenge. So our algorithm would then work through all of the different criteria to determine what's the most suitable airport to divert to. We then have to calculate the distance between the airports. We defined the speed to then see if there's a slot available at the airport that you would divert to. So in that instance, we would go to Heathrow. Now, outputs and input has been a strong focus of our research, because, as you can imagine, with traffic numbers being back to 2019 level, so pre-COVID level, we see a lot of mass diversion events happening after a drone attack. Probably we've all heard about it, what happened in 2018 at Gatwick, but we tend to have weather-related events where we just can't go to one of the airports, so we have to divert. And that means if you all of a sudden lose one of the critical national infrastructure, you put a lot of stress on the system. Sometimes the stress is so great that some of the aircraft have to declare a fuel emergency. Now, when you declare a fuel emergency, you don't care about contractual agreements, you just want to get the plane on the ground before you run out of fuel. So when we talk about resilience, understanding where the bottlenecks are really quite crucial. So one of the things we've been quite keen to work on is to facilitate the discussion with industry, to get input from industry. For example, how many stands would you have available at 12 o'clock at Heathrow? Well, not that many, because all of the big aircraft that came from the Atlantic came in. So there's not a lot of diversion capability at Heathrow. So all of a sudden you would put planes somewhere where there are probably only 3 planes an hour. Now, if you divert 3 more planes, that doesn't sound like a lot. But what about the people that would then have to be taken away from the airport into the city? By just having an understanding where planes would divert to in such a scenario would give some great insight into industry when it comes to their contingency planning. And we can also adjust the variables. We can just put in different variables. So for example, if you have a schedule for the 9th of March, where you can feed that into the computation model. But we all know as soon as there's any bank holiday, people tend to fly to Spain or somewhere where the weather is actually decent enough so you can go to the beach. So we always have peak days. So you can run it during peak times, you can run it during quiet times, you can also run it during winter times where, for example, one of the airports, the diversion airports, would carry out some maintenance, so you probably lose some of the runway capacity. So it's very adaptable. And as I mentioned, with the border force or with the train connection, you can really hopefully expand that computational model to various use cases. So what we are currently doing for DAFNI is building the prototype. So we can just divert the planes, but hopefully we will find another call so we can expand it to other sectors. So such as the train connectivity, or what about the coaches? Is there enough staff to cope with the diversions? So the data set will be uploaded, but there has also been discussions with NATS. So NATS is the ATC provider in the UK about using some of the data for the DAFNI platform to be able to feed in different data into our data set. So the computational model will be able to cope with it as long as it's in the right format. So we've defined a framework in an Excel spreadsheet, so it can just take all of the information from there when it comes to stand availability, what's the runway capacity, and what's your flight schedule for the day. So if there are any questions related to how we code, so we use Python for that, please feel free to reach out to Desmond or Irene, or feel free to look us up on LinkedIn and drop us an email if there's anything you want to follow up on. Thank you very much.